Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the French president is deliberately provoking Muslims by encouraging the display of blasphemous cartoons. In a series of tweets, Khan said Emmanuel Macron heard the sentiments of millions of Muslims in Europe and across the world by targeting Islam. Last week, the French president launched crackdown against Muslims, accusing them of separatism. Israeli forces have killed an 18-year-old Palestinian boy during a raid in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry says the youth died of series of wounds after being physically assaulted by Israeli troops. Azerbaijan says it has liberated several villages in the Gubadli region from Armenian occupation. The Azeri Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces are targeting Akhtam, Turton and Akshabadi cities. Authorities in the Karabakh region said nearly 1,000 Armenian troops have been killed since September 27. In Belarus, thousands of protesters took to the streets in Minsk for yet another week, keeping pressure on President Alexander Lukashenko. Opposition parties have also threatened to launch a national strike if the president refuses to resign. Belarus has been in a state of political turmoil since the August 9 presidential vote, which opposition says was rigged in favor of Lukashenko. The U.S. has recorded its highest daily COVID-19 cases for a second day as over 94,000 people have tested positive overnight. France has reported a record 45,000 new coronavirus cases and 138 deaths in the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 9 people lost their lives to the virus since yesterday, taking the toll to 6,736. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1.1 million lives and infected 42.5 million people so far. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has raised serious concerns over the rising Islamophobia in France. In a series of tweets, Khan said President Emmanuel Macron is promoting hatred by targeting Islam. More details in this report.
France has the largest Muslim population in Europe at around 6 million. But they are forced to live in danger following the beheading of a teacher who showed blasphemous cartoons to his pupil in Paris last week. In the days after the killing, the government launched a crackdown against Muslim organizations while vigilante groups have attacked mosques. President Emmanuel Macron described Islam as a religion in crisis and accused Muslims of separatism. He also defended the display of blasphemous cartoons. His remarks sparked a wave of criticism in France and beyond. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said Macron heard the sentiments of millions of Muslims in Europe and across the world. Khan has long been raising voice against Islamophobia at several global platforms.
The Prophet lives in our hearts. When he's ridiculed, when he's insulted, it hurts. As we human know, we human beings understand one thing: the pain of the heart is far, far, far more hurtful than physical pain. And that's why the Muslims react. The Holocaust is treated with sensitivity because it gives the Jewish community pain. That's all we ask, that do not use freedom of speech to cause us pain by insulting a holy prophet. That's all we want.
Earlier, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Europe will collapse if it fails to address the rising Islamophobia. He also condemned the French government's actions against Muslims.
Macron needs treatment on the mental level. What else can be said to a head of state who does not understand freedom of belief and who behaves in this way to millions of people living in his country who are members of a different faith? First of all, a check on the mental level.
Many in France fear the recent government actions will contribute to a discourse that endangers Muslim lives and will further deepen tensions between the state and its largest minority.
Now moving on, Afghan security forces have killed a senior Al-QAEDA leader Abu Mohsin al-Masri in a special operation in Ghazni province. The National Directorate of Security says al-Masri was the supreme leader of the organization in the Indian subcontinent.
Al-Masri was on the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation's most wanted terrorist list. The FBI said he also went by the name Hassam Abdul Rauf and was an Egyptian national. In a statement, the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center called al-Masri's killing a major setback to Al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, the toll from Saturday's blast outside an educational center in Kabul has risen to 30. Officials said that over 70 people were injured in the suicide attack. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad has called for a reduction in violence by all sides to secure a ceasefire. He also confirmed the deaths of 12 children in a government airstrike in the Takhar province.
In Afghanistan, Hizb Islami leader Gulbuddin Hekmatyar says an interim government is the only solution to the country's long war. At a press conference, he said ongoing peace talks in Doha are not intra-Afghan talks. Hekmatyar said the Taliban have not yet accepted the current government. About his recent trip to Pakistan, Hekmatyar said Islamabad has assured of its continuous role in the peace process. Azerbaijan says it has liberated several villages in the Gubadli region from Armenian occupation. The Azeri Defense Ministry said the Armenian forces are targeting Akhtam, Turtan and Akshabadi cities. Refuting Armenia's accusation of targeting civilian settlements, Baku said it is ready to implement a ceasefire. In an interview, Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said he's confident in the effectiveness of the peace negotiations. He added the peace talks also depend on the effective participation from Armenia. But Armenian President Armen Sarkisyan accused Baku of being aggressively destructive. Authorities in the Karabakh region said nearly 1,000 Armenian troops have been killed since September 27th. Now moving on, Israeli forces have killed an 18-year-old Palestinian boy during a raid in the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Amir Abdul Rahim died of serious wounds after being physically assaulted by Israeli troops. Israel has intensified atrocities against Palestinians amid a U.S. push for more countries to normalize ties with Tel Aviv. The international community and the United Nations have repeatedly condemned Israel's unilateral actions in Palestine. In Yemen, the Saudi-led military coalition says it has destroyed another explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthis. This comes just a few hours after the coalition said it intercepted a Houthi drone aimed at the kingdom. State media says the drone was destroyed before it hit Saudi Arabia's southern region. Earlier, Houthi said they targeted Saudi Arabia, Jazan and Abha airports and the Khamis Mushaid base with drones. Cross-border attacks by Yemen rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the pandemic expired. In late June, missiles reached the Saudi capital Riyadh and the coalition retaliated with the airstrikes. Iraqis took to the streets of Baghdad and Basra, marking a year since anti-government unrest erupted across the country. Protesters were demanding an overhaul of a political system they see as profoundly corrupt. They waved the Iraqi flag and held up pictures of those killed during the protest. Over 560 people have been killed since a wave of popular unrest began on 1st of October last year. Fighting between political parties clinging to power has fueled the crisis. Last year's protests caused the resignation of Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mehdi, who was replaced in May by Mustafa al-Khadimi. The United Nations says a treaty to ban nuclear weapons has been ratified. UN Chief Spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said 50 countries signed the treaty and it will come into force in 90 days. Dujarric said the treaty represents the UN's commitment to eliminate all nuclear weapons. He said the accord is a tribute to the survivors of nuclear explosions and tests. The 50th signature came on the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. The treaty requires all ratifying countries to never develop, test, produce, and possess nuclear weapons. Japan says it has decided not to sign the treaty in consideration of its security ties with the US. Thousands of protesters have gathered in Thailand's capital city of Bangkok. They took to the streets after Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha ignored their deadline to resign. A protest leader said if the Prime Minister doesn't resign, more protests will be held in a peaceful manner. But in a tweet, the Prime Minister's office said he is not quitting. In a statement, Chan-o-cha said the crisis should be discussed in the Parliament's special session on Monday. Thailand has been rocked by protests for nearly a year demanding Chan-o-cha's resignation and reforms to monarchy. Malaysia's King Sultan Abdullah has rejected government's proposal to impose a state of emergency due to COVID-19 crisis. This comes after the king held consultations with political leaders over Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin's proposals. In a statement, Presidential Palace said the king believes the government has handled the pandemic well. It said Muhyiddin's government is capable of continuing to manage the crisis. The Prime Minister made the request following a resurgence in coronavirus cases. Earlier, opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim also denounced the proposals presented by Muhyiddin. In Belarus, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in Minsk for yet another week, keeping pressure on President Alexander Lukashenko. This comes a day before the opposition threatens to launch a national strike if he refuses to resign. Crowds steamed through the capital, shouting strike and beating drums on the 11th straight weekend of mass protests. Security forces detained dozens of demonstrators while cellular services were disrupted in the parts of the city. Belarus has been rocked by mass protests since August's controversial presidential election. The US, the EU and Britain have imposed sanctions against a string of senior Belarusian officials. Over in the United States, President Donald Trump has voted in person in the battleground state of Florida. This marks the first time an incumbent president has voted in person in the swing state. More details in this report.
U.S. President Donald Trump and his rival Joe Biden have hit swing states with just 10 days until election on November 3rd. Trump voted in West Palm Beach, followed by a trio of appearances in North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. He has joined more than 53 million Americans who cast early ballots ahead of election.
Any complications in there?
No, not much. It was a very secure vote. Much more secure than when you send in a ballot, I can tell you that. Everything was perfect, very strict, right by the rules. When you send in your ballot, could never be like that. It could never be secure like that. They've done a fantastic job over here. Great people inside.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden addressed supporters in Pennsylvania and warned of a dark winter ahead unless the country changed its ways. Biden lambasted Trump's attempts to contain COVID-19, which has claimed lives of 224,000 Americans so far.
We have 10 days left. It may come down to Pennsylvania. And I believe in you. I believe in my state. The choice has never been clearer and the stakes have never been higher. So it's time to stand up. Let's take back our democracy now. We can do this. There's nothing we cannot do. God bless you all.
While Biden leads Trump nationally, opinion polls show a closer race in crucial battleground states, which will decide the election.
People in Chile are set to vote in a referendum on drafting a new constitution. 15 million people are heading to the polls in South American country's first referendum. If the plebiscite is approved, Chileans will vote in April to elect the commission that will write the new constitution. Recent polls show 70% of the country's population is in the favor of a new constitution. Massive anti-government protests demanding equality last year prompted the vote. But concerns still remain that a new constitution may not be enough to calm protests and demands for greater equality in the country. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay tuned. And moving on, the United States has recorded its highest daily COVID-19 cases for a second day as over 94,000 people have tested positive overnight. India has registered 578 deaths and over 50,000 infections overnight, while the caseload is nearing 7.9 million. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1.1 million lives and infected 42.5 million people so far. More details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to spread, making new daily records and infecting thousands. In Latin America, Chile has identified more than 500,000 cases of COVID-19 since the outbreak began in March. But restaurants and bars have opened with limited capacity as office workers return and some schools also reopen. The U.S. top infectious disease expert warns the resurgence in COVID-19 cases show the pandemic remains a global challenge.
Yesterday, we had 83,000 cases in the United States, which is the most we've ever had on a single day, even at the very worst part of the outbreak. And if you look at the map of the European Union and Italy and France and Spain and the UK, the same thing is happening there. They're having a resurgence of cases.
The streets and squares of Athens have become empty after a curfew was imposed to contain the virus. While in Rome, scuffles broke out between police and the people who were trying to break a recently implemented curfew. Italy's tally of confirmed COVID-19 cases have surpassed 500,000, with more than 200,000 of them still under treatment. France has reported record 45,000 new cases and 138 deaths in the past 24 hours. Doctors in France have warned that the hospitals are becoming overwhelmed.
Unfortunately, the number of COVID-19 patients is increasing, and it is expected that probably in mid-November we'll have 100% of all our beds saturated by COVID-19.
Australia's COVID-19 epicenter, Victoria State, has delayed the easing of lockdown restrictions due to an outbreak in Melbourne. Meanwhile, China has reported 15 new imported COVID-19 cases on the mainland.
The new coronavirus has claimed 9 more lives in Pakistan overnight, raising the death toll to 6,736. The health ministry says 832 people tested positive for the disease in the past 24 hours. The ministry said there are over 10,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 327,000 countrywide cases, more than 310,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 143,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 102,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, nearly 19,000 people have been infected so far. International human rights groups have urged Bangladeshi authorities to end harassing rights defenders. In a joint statement, the rights group said Bangladeshi intelligence officers have privately visited the activists' family members. They said the officers pressured the activists to stop publicly criticizing the government. The groups also slammed Bangladesh for failing to comply with its international obligations to uphold fundamental rights. They said the government is conducting widespread crackdown on journalists and activists. In Cameroon, gunmen have killed 8 children and wounded a dozen others in an attack on a school in the Anglophone southwest region. Kamba City Sub-Prefect Ali Anagu said the gunmen came on motorbikes around midday. He said many children were injured after jumping from the second story of the school in an attempt to escape. The official said the attack was conducted by the separatist insurgents who seek to form a breakaway state in the west. Last year, officials blamed separatists for kidnapping dozens of school children. In the U.S. state of Colorado, the ongoing wildfire has claimed lives of an elderly couple. This comes as winds continue to fan the second largest blaze in the state's history. Authorities have issued evacuation orders to the residents of eastern Estes Park. The order comes as wind gusts are pushing the 191,000-acre fire towards east. Fire incident commander said firefighters are battling to contain the blaze aggressively. He expressed hope that a winter storm overnight will aid in containment. Livingstone said the fire was probably caused by a human, but the investigation is not complete yet. In Vietnam, the death toll from landslide, floods and other natural disasters triggered by rains has risen to 130. The Central Steering Committee for National Disaster Prevention and Control said another 18 people are missing. The deaths were mainly reported in the provinces of Quang Tri, Thua Thien, and Quang Nam. The committee mentioned that floods damaged 9,300 hectares of crops. It said the disaster disrupted traffic on several highways. The Philippines government has evacuated nearly 1,800 people in the wake of tropical storm MOLAVE. National Weather Bureau has issued tropical cyclone wind alerts for several provinces in the Bicol and Calabarzon regions. The Bureau said the storm is expected to make landfall while crossing the southern Luzon area. It said MOLAVE is expected to continue intensifying over the South China Sea and possibly reaching typhoon category by Tuesday evening. The Disaster Warning Agency has cancelled sea travel operations as 662 people were stranded at ports due to the strong winds. It said 532 families were preemptively evacuated to temporary shelters in the Bicol provinces. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now moving on. The chairman of one of the world's biggest conglomerates, Samsung, has passed away in South Korea. Lee Kyun-hee, aged 78, was hospitalized for 6 years after a heart attack. In a statement, the company called Chairman Lee a true visionary who transformed Samsung into the world-leading innovator. Lee inherited the chairmanship of the Samsung Group in 1987. Under Lee's leadership, Samsung rose to become the world's biggest technology firm by revenue. Hong Kong travelers boarded a flight to nowhere to enjoy a bird's-eye view of the city before flying straight back home. This is the latest travel trend to give people a glimpse of normality during the COVID-19 pandemic. More details in this report.
The new coronavirus pandemic has slammed travel operations worldwide and hit the hospitality sector. With the aviation industry in deep crisis, several carriers have had to come up with creative ways to raise cash. In Hong Kong, an Airbus 320 with 100 passengers on board flew within 200 nautical miles in the southeast direction. Passengers got a top view from the window sightseeing over the South China Sea and some of Hong Kong's iconic city views.
Just like you will never have to fly from Hong Kong to Hong Kong because of COVID-19. That's the only chance you can fly from Hong Kong to Hong Kong.
The flight themed Embrace Hong Kong had sold out in 30 minutes, with tickets costing between $110 and $153 US. Meanwhile, with few allowed to travel in and out of Singapore due to COVID-19 restrictions, hundreds have flocked to the airport to eat airplane food at a pop-up restaurant on board an A380 jet.
There's more than enough food, and of course the beautiful beverage selection accompanying that through the experience today. So looking forward to bringing some Singapore Airlines hospitality back back to the sky, but we're on the ground obviously. But the 380 dining experience will be a wonderful journey for many people today.
The meals range from $40 per person in economy to $480 for a suites class meal. Most of Singapore airline planes have been grounded since the outbreak.
A French company has announced it will build the world's largest insect farm by early 2022. The farm aims to produce 100,000 tons of insect products annually and conserve land use while creating 500 jobs. This report has the details.
Mounting global demand for food is rapidly using up available land. But one French startup says it has the answer by farming insects indoors. Earlier this month, the insect startup raised $224 million from investors to build an insect farm in northern France. Not content with that, the company has set its sights to expand even further.
We are operating today in Burgundy, the largest mealworm vertical farm in the world, and we are going to build something much bigger in Amiens, north of France, the highest vertical farm in the world, up to 40 meters high, the largest insect farm in the world, and even more importantly, the first carbon negative vertical farm in the world.
At the farm in the eastern French town of Dole, the mealworm's larvae are processed into protein-rich flour and oil used in animal feed. Some of the insects are cultivated to become adult beetles who will reproduce.
There are several products. First one is insect frass, which are used as fertilizers in fields and various types of crops. The second product is our protein-rich flour, a part of the larvae that are processed and manufactured. We produce flour rich in protein. We also have insect oil.
With the motive of needing to do more with less, the company's CEO says they're exploring insect products for human consumption.
A 9-day fashion week has kicked off in Beijing's Art Zone following the easing of coronavirus restrictions. More details in this report.
While international fashion weeks have gone fully digital with few physical runways due to COVID-19, China's domestic fashion weeks are blooming with extravagant offline ceremonies. China's Fashion Week commenced this week in the capital, Beijing. Masks were not mandatory in the audience and very few people were seen wearing them. Social distancing measures were not in place during the show and backstage.
Under different lights, material looks different. You can feel it if you watch the show offline, such as the gloss or if it is light enough to float in the air. But if watching online, you cannot feel these kinds of characteristics.
After the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic hit, the country's fashion industry had a rebound in August. The recovery made China a lone bright spot in the retail world for the global consumer brands like Louis Vuitton.
The data of this year will look better and better monthly. Like what I've said, in August, the domestic consumption on clothing increased 4.4%. I think in terms of fashion industry in the fourth quarter, winter clothing is the most important. The value of it is more important than that of summer.
China has so far recorded more than 85,000 confirmed coronavirus cases, with the death toll crossing 4,500.
Mixed martial arts champion Khabib Nurmagomedov has announced his retirement. This followed his win against American Justin Gaethje in the main UFC 254 event. Nurmagomedov defended his UFC lightweight title and remained undefeated in a record 29 fights. In a post-fight interview, Nurmagomedov said he promised his mother this will be his last fight. He thanked all members of his team and his supporters. The 32-year-old Russian defeated Conor McGregor in Las Vegas, Nevada in a 2018 lightweight title fight. Nurmagomedov was the first Russian and Muslim to win the UFC lightweight championship. In football, Manchester United have drawn their home fixture against Chelsea in the English Premier League. Both teams had a fair share of chances but failed to score. More details in this report.
United stay on the 15th spot while Chelsea moved to 6th after 9 points from 6 fixtures. In another fixture, Crystal Palace beat Fulham 2-1 at Craven Cottage. Earlier, Manchester City played a 1-1 draw with West Ham. Mikel Antonio scored the opener for the Hammers before Phil Foden levelled for City. In another match, Liverpool defeated Sheffield United 2-1 after a closely fought contest. In the German Bundesliga, Bayern Munich has thrashed Eintracht Frankfurt 5-0 at the Allianz Arena. Polish forward Robert Lewandowski scored a hat-trick to take his tally to 10 goals in 5 games. Bayern moved into second place with 12 points from 5 games. Meanwhile, in the Spanish La Liga, Real Madrid have beaten arch-rivals Barcelona 3-1 at Camp Nou. This win, the title holders have moved to the top of the table.
And for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.